My name is Margaret Louise Campbell. I'm 68 years old. I live alone now in a quiet apartment on the third floor of a building that smells like fresh paint and old promises. There's a tiny balcony with 2 chairs. I only sit in one. The other is more habit than hope. I wasn't always here. For 40 years, I lived in a house with blue shutters and a door that stuck in the winter. I knew how it sounded when someone dropped their keys on the hallway table. I could tell who was home by the rhythm of their steps, and for a long time, that someone was Henry. We married when I was 28. He was 30. He'd just passed the bar, and I had finally landed a steady job as a school counselor. Our wedding was small, just close family and a string quartet that got the Bach piece slightly wrong, but no one noticed. I wore my sister's veil, and Henry's hands trembled when he placed the ring on mine. I thought that meant something. I held on to that tremble longer than I should have. The first decade passed like a string of photographs. Birthdays with too much frosting, camping trips with wet sleeping bags, one hospital scare that turned out to be nothing. Then came Daniel, our only son. His birth was the first time I truly felt I was needed, not just wanted, but essential. It was a purpose that couldn't be undone by silence or slammed doors. We raised him in that same blue-shuttered house. I remember how he'd run barefoot through the kitchen, his feet sticky with orange juice, laughing as Henry chased him around the table. I can still hear that laugh when I close my eyes, but it's harder now. Henry was always busy. Law firm life, he said, and I was always understanding. That was my role. I cooked dinners that went cold. I folded shirts that came back from trips smelling unfamiliar. I stopped wearing lipstick because clients preferred me natural when I showed up to the firm's annual events. I wore navy. I listened. I swallowed questions with a smile. On Daniel's 18th birthday, we took a photo in front of the fireplace. Henry was between us, arms around our shoulders. My smile looks genuine in the picture, too genuine. It was the night before Daniel left for college. I remember standing in his empty room the next morning, holding the t-shirt he left behind. I pressed it to my face and cried so softly I didn't wake Henry. Or maybe I did, and he stayed silent anyway. Things shifted after that. With Daniel gone, the house got too quiet. Our conversations became transactional. Groceries, appointments, the occasional, "Did you pay the electric bill?" I tried to fill the silence with routines. Tea at 4 p.m., a walk to the market on Saturdays, rearranging the same bookshelf every 3 weeks. And then came our 40th wedding anniversary. I had found the old dress, ivory silk, slightly yellowed, tucked in tissue paper in the back of the closet. I didn't plan to wear it, just touch it. I wanted to remember who I had been. I lit a candle, played the song we danced to at our reception, and waited. Henry didn't come home that night. He texted at 10:48 p.m. "Sorry, caught up with a client. Let's celebrate this weekend. Love you." I stared at those words for a long time, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. I blew out the candle, folded the dress again. This time I didn't cry. 3 weeks later I found the receipt. A jewelry store in another city, a bracelet I never received, a name I didn't recognize on the gift note, Elise. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just made tea, 2 cups, like I always had, and poured one down the sink. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. "Hi, I'm looking for a divorce attorney, quietly if possible." That was the first time I chose myself in years. I didn't tell Henry right away. For days, I moved through our house like a polite tenant waiting for the lease to end. I made his coffee. I nodded when he spoke. I answered questions with enough warmth to avoid suspicion, but inside, a door had closed. Not with a slam, but with a quiet, decisive click. I started keeping a file. Not on paper. Too risky. I created a folder on an old flash drive, the kind Daniel used to use for school projects. Inside, I saved everything: bank statements, email confirmations, a photo of the bracelet he never gave me. I even included screenshots of social media posts. Elise liked to tag wine bars and weekend getaways. She never tagged him, but I knew. He had a tell. He always ordered steak rare, and she'd posted a caption that read, "He likes it bleeding, just like always." Elliot, my lawyer, was calm, methodical. He didn't flinch when I told him about the affair. He didn't pity me when I said I hadn't worked in over a decade. He said words like equitable distribution and undisclosed assets, and he said them with quiet confidence, like this wasn't the first time a woman had walked into his office with a shaking voice and a sharp mind. "We'll go after everything that's legally yours," he told me. "What if it gets ugly?" I asked. "Then it was already ugly. We're just opening the windows." That line stayed with me. I began to notice how little space I actually took up in my own home. The living room was filled with his books, his whiskey, his golf trophies. Even the art on the walls had been chosen for him, not with me. The only corner that was mine was the one by the kitchen window, where my herb garden sat in ceramic pots. Basil, rosemary, thyme. I watered them like they were proof I still knew how to keep something alive. Then came the morning I accidentally knocked over a cup of coffee in our bedroom. It spilled across the floor and onto a pair of Henry's cufflinks, silver ones I gave him for our 20th anniversary. I bent to wipe them off and saw it, a second phone, black, slim, hidden in a shoebox beneath the dresser. My breath caught, but I didn't touch it right away. I stared at it like it might explode, then reached in slowly. I powered it on. No passcode. Messages. Hundreds. "I wish I could wake up next to you. She doesn't suspect anything. You make me feel like I'm 30 again." He had never said that to me. Not when I was 30. Not when I turned 40. Not ever. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I transferred everything from that phone to my flash drive. I copied call logs, images, even the little voice memos she had sent. One of her humming a tune, off-key but intimate. I labeled them carefully. This wasn't revenge. This was inventory. That night, Henry came home with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "Felt like we could use a date night," he said. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or shove the phone in his face, but I didn't. I smiled. I poured 2 glasses. I told him the noodles were too salty. He doesn't know I know, I thought, and that's the only advantage I have left. Later, after he fell asleep on the couch with a half-finished glass in his hand, I walked into the bedroom. I opened my closet and found the lipstick I hadn't worn in 15 years, the deep plum one I loved before he told me it made me look severe. I applied it slowly, watching my reflection emerge like a stranger returning home. Then I pulled down my wedding dress. The zipper had rusted slightly. The fabric was yellowed, but the shape was still there. I slipped it on over my nightgown. It didn't quite fit, but that wasn't the point. I stood in front of the mirror, barefoot, arms loose at my sides. "Goodbye," I whispered. Not to Henry, not even to the woman he cheated with, but to the version of me who kept waiting to be chosen. The next morning, I packed a weekend bag and left the dress folded neatly on the bed. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to explain a thing. I checked into a quiet inn 2 towns over, the kind of place with quilts on the beds and tea in real china cups. No one knew me there. The woman at the front desk gave me a room with a garden view and asked if I was traveling for business or pleasure. I said, neither, and she smiled politely, not pressing further. I appreciated that more than she knew. In that room, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. I spent the day doing nothing important. I took a bath and let the water go cold around me. I ordered tomato soup and sourdough toast from room service and ate slowly, as though chewing was an act of recovery. I put on an old playlist, Songs from my 20s, when I used to dance in the kitchen barefoot, when I still felt whole. One of the songs made me cry. Not because of the lyrics, but because it made me remember the woman I used to be before my days were divided into errands and silence. Before I became the person who waited for the garage door to open just to feel less alone. That night, I called Daniel. He didn't pick up at first, but he texted back, "Hey Mom, all good?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "Not really. I've left your father. I'm safe. We'll talk soon." 3 minutes later, he called. His voice was low and careful, like he wasn't sure what terrain he was stepping into. "Are you okay?" "I'm not broken," I said, "just done pretending I'm not." He didn't ask for details, not then. I think he could hear in my voice that I needed space, not questions. Before we hung up, he said something that stayed with me. "You sound different." I did. I sounded like someone who had stepped outside the cage and realized the door had never been locked. The next morning, I met Elliot at his office. I handed him the flash drive and the password to the second phone, which I had carefully boxed and labeled, for evidence, not for memory. He reviewed everything in silence. Then he looked at me, eyes sharp but kind. "This is solid. We can move quickly." "I don't want to drag him through the mud," I said. "You don't have to," he replied, "but you don't have to protect him either." He handed me a folder. Inside was the draft of the divorce petition, my name at the top, Margaret Louise Campbell, no hyphen, no Mrs., just me. I signed it with a pen that felt heavier than it was. This is real, I told myself. It's not a phase. It's not a pause. This is the end of something, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of everything else. I returned home the next day. The house felt smaller somehow, as if it already knew I no longer belonged there. I walked through each room like I was saying goodbye to furniture, to walls, to ghosts. In the bedroom, the wedding dress was still on the bed, untouched. I folded it carefully, slid it into its original box, and placed it on the top shelf of the closet. Not as a keepsake, as closure. Henry was out when I got back. That was his pattern, avoiding the house when things got uncomfortable. I didn't wait for him. I took off my rings and placed them in the center of the dining table, between the salt and pepper shakers. A full stop, resting in silver. Then I boiled water, made a single cup of tea, and sat down to plan my next steps. The suitcase I had packed the night I left was still by the door. I opened it, took out the plum lipstick, set it next to my toothbrush. It belonged there now. The divorce petition was delivered on a Wednesday. Henry called within the hour, though I let it ring twice before I picked up. Not out of power play, I just needed a breath. I wasn't ready to hear his voice fill the house I had already emotionally moved out of. "Maggie," he said, using the name he reserved for when he was trying to be gentle. "You're doing this?" There was no anger in his voice, just disbelief, as if the idea that I could leave was more shocking than the idea that he'd cheated. "Yes," I said, "I've already done it." A pause. "We've been married 40 years. "Yes, and I was present for every one of them." He asked to meet, to talk, said things like, "We can work through this," and "You're not thinking clearly." But I was. For the first time in years, every thought was crisp, clean, untangled. "There's nothing to work through," I told him. "There's just what you did, and what I finally chose to do about it." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I made lasagna, his favorite. But I made it for myself, and I ate it alone, playing music in the kitchen that he used to call "too sad for dinner." The windows were open. The smell of garlic and oregano filled the space, and I danced. Not out of joy, but because my body finally had room to move. The legal process moved fast. Elliot was efficient. Henry's team predictably tried to draw things out. They questioned everything: my contribution to the marriage, my right to certain accounts, even the emotional distress claim. But Elliot had prepared for that. "Let them argue," he said. "Facts don't get nervous. They just sit there and win." And they did. Every receipt, every screenshot, every proof of withdrawal, property title, private investment account, I had them all, organized, dated, annotated, my life laid out like a case file. The first court date was a blur. I remember the cold of the courtroom, the click of someone's heels on the tile, the weight of my coat across my lap. Henry sat on the other side, flanked by lawyers. He didn't look at me until the judge entered, and even then, he glanced like he was checking a mirror for a smudge. When he finally took the stand, his voice cracked. "We were complicated," he said. "We were forgotten," I thought. And I was the one who disappeared. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I had already mourned this marriage in the bathroom, in the grocery store parking lot, in the silence after he rolled away in the night. The ruling came 3 weeks later, half of all assets. Full ownership of the Whidbey Island house, yes, the one he bought for retreats, the same one Elise had posted pictures of in spring. A $1.5 million lump sum settlement, and a separate $500,000 for financial deception and misconduct. I read the ruling alone, sitting at the kitchen table in my bathrobe, tea going cold beside me. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like gravity, like the moment your feet hit solid ground after floating in survival mode for too long. The next day I began packing, not in panic, not in grief, in ceremony. I boxed books I loved and donated the rest. I folded clothes neatly and set aside the ones I hadn't worn in years. I stood in front of the hallway mirror for a long time before taking it down. Not because I was sentimental, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to take my reflection back. Daniel called that evening. "I heard," he said softly. "It's done," I replied. "Do you need help with anything?" "Just this," I said. "Say you're proud of me." A pause. "Mom, I'm so proud of you." I felt it then. Not pride exactly, but peace. I placed the plum lipstick in my new purse. I lit a candle in the empty living room. I poured 1 glass of red wine. And I didn't toast to endings. I toasted to return. The Whidbey Island house smelled like cedar and something softer. Freedom, maybe. The movers had come and gone, leaving behind boxes that sat like quiet sentinels around the living room. I didn't unpack all at once. I let the space breathe, let it meet me gently, room by room. That first night, I slept on the floor. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The mattress was still rolled in plastic, but I laid down a blanket, rested my head on a folded sweater, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. The window was cracked open, just enough to let in the sound of waves. My body ached from the day, but my chest was light. No one had asked me what kind of mattress to buy. No one had told me I snored or took up too much space or left the window too wide. It was just me. In the morning, I made tea and drank it on the porch. There was no table yet, just a folding chair and a stack of books as a makeshift stand. I wrote in a notebook while the sun lifted over the water. I wrote not for clarity or publication, but because I had a voice again, and I wanted to hear it on paper. I wrote, "I am still here, still me, just untethered now." After breakfast, I hung the wind chimes Daniel gave me for my birthday last year. I never put them up at the old house. Henry hated the sound, said it reminded him of cheap porches and unfinished thoughts. But I loved that sound, soft, unpredictable, a little bit unruly. I spent the week settling in slowly, not decorating, claiming. I painted the bathroom a pale green, hung a photograph I took of Daniel when he was 10 and missing his front teeth. I wore the perfume I used to wear in college, the one Henry once called too sweet. I found my old iPod and charged it for the first time in years. It still worked. I played a playlist titled Margaret Before. The 4th track made me cry, not from sadness, but recognition. I danced alone, in socks on hardwood floors, no rhythm, no purpose, just motion, just proof that I had a body, and it still remembered joy. I kept writing. I wrote about tea and silence and the hum of grief that never fully fades but also doesn't consume you. I wrote about starting over, not in your 20s, but in your 60s, when everyone thinks you're done blooming. I posted one of the essays to a blog I created in the quiet hours between paperwork and painting. Still Me, that's what I called it. I didn't expect anyone to read it. It was for me, like whispering into a canyon just to hear the echo. But someone did read it, then another, then 100 more. I began receiving emails from women, retired teachers, empty nesters, divorcees, widows. One wrote, "Your words made me take off my wedding ring tonight. I'd been sleeping in it like it was armor, but I think I'm ready to stop pretending." Another said, "I haven't written anything in 30 years. I'm starting again. Thank you." I printed those messages and kept them in a drawer beside my bed. Not because I needed validation, but because they reminded me that I wasn't just healing. I was helping. I wasn't trying to be anyone's guide. I wasn't chasing reinvention. I was simply remembering how to live. One afternoon, I went into town for groceries and ran into a neighbor, an older woman with silver hair tied in a scarf and a basket full of lemons. "New to the area?" she asked. "Sort of," I smiled. "New to myself more than anything." She laughed like she understood. That night I made lemon bars. I hadn't baked in years. I called Daniel, and we talked for over an hour. I could hear the ease in his voice now, the space where worry used to be. "You sound good, Mom," he said. "I am," I told him. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a performance. It was the truth. The morning of my 69th birthday, I woke before the sun, not from anxiety or habit, but anticipation. I brewed tea, placed a single candle into a slice of store-bought coffee cake, and carried it out to the porch. The sky was still pale, but the wind was kind. I lit the candle, closed my eyes. I didn't make a wish. I gave thanks. Not for surviving, for choosing. Daniel called at 9 a.m., singing off-key with his kids in the background. He asked if I was doing anything special. I told him I was spending the day with someone I loved very much. He laughed. "New man I haven't met?" "No," I said, "me." Later that afternoon, I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out a small box. Inside was the ring I had worn for 40 years. I hadn't touched it since the night I left it on the dining table. I held it in my palm, feeling its weight. Not heavy, just familiar. I walked it down to the beach, pressed it into the sand, and let the waves take it. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just light, like I had released something I didn't even realize I was still carrying. I returned home, opened my laptop, and drafted a new post for the blog on becoming whole. People ask me if I'm happy now. I tell them I am learning happiness, the way you learn a second language, slowly, by sound and shape and repetition. I am not a woman rebuilt. I am not a woman recovered. I am a woman remembered by herself. That's enough. I hit publish. 3 hours later, I received a message from a woman in Kansas. "I'm 63. I just filed today. I thought it was too late, but maybe it's just time." I whispered yes to the screen and then closed the laptop. That night, I put on a record, vinyl, scratched, imperfect. The song was one Henry hated, but I had always loved. I danced slowly, arms wrapped around my own waist, in the kitchen that now held only my things, the fridge with only my notes, the cupboard with only my favorite mug, the mirror that no longer asked me to smile for anyone but myself. Before bed, I placed a fresh pair of sheets on the mattress, lavender-scented, new. The old ones, the ones we used for years, had been donated weeks ago. Someone else could sleep in that threadbare cotton. I needed softness, something chosen, something mine. I slipped into bed, turned off the lamp, let the dark arrive without fear. he is gone. I am here, and that is the better story.